Welcome to the MacKids streaming Schoolhouse. Thank you for everyone for being so patient with us while we had a little tech issues early on when we launched the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to Carole and Tracy who are here with us today as our guest social studies teachers. My name is Katie Halata and I work in the School and Library Marketing Department in Macmillan Children's. I'm going to be hosting today's event with Carole and Tracy. Now, without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce our first guest teacher of the day, who is Carole Lindstrom. Carole is a proud member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe Indians. She was born and raised in Nebraska and currently makes her home in Maryland. She is the author of Girls Dance, Boys Fiddles, and We Are Water Protectors. Carole, Tracy, and I are going to mute ourselves and hand things over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie. And I just want to say also thank you so much to MacKids Streaming Schoolhouse for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here today to talk to you. Let me start my presentation here. Sorry, make this small. Okay. As Katie mentioned, I am Ojibwe, also Anishinaabe, which means First People. I am a citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe, as Katie said, and my tribal homelands are in Turtle Mountain, North Dakota. This slide shows you the flag, or my tribal flag here, and then the picture here of more on the left is the seal, just up close. And then you'll see down below me, and this is the tribal chairman to the right of me, Jamie Azure, and some of the tribal members from the Turtle Mountain. They were in DC, where I happen to live, near DC in Maryland. And I was able to go there for a Indigenous Peoples March. So let's talk about what you may wonder, kind of why am I talking about water, or why social studies in water? First, I wanted to say something that I think is so important, that, you know, societies is most are founded along water, or have been. You know, if you think back to my ancestors who were on Turtle Island, what we call the United States, or North America prior, was you know, all societies are founded along water because, you know, for many reasons. You know, certainly water is we drink it, but, you know, the fishing, the hunting, the animals that are food for us. Travel is very important. Economic reasons, for, you know, boating, canoes, when there were fur trade was happening. Even electrical, say things now, hydroelectric. So water is very important. It always has been, and it always will be. And as it's part of my Ojibwe culture, women are the protectors of water. That's just the way my culture has always looked at it. Men were the protectors of the fire, are the protectors of fire, and women are the protectors of water. So it's something that's just a part of the society or the culture that I live in. So it was very important to me to write a book about water, and to be able to talk about the importance of water, not just as, you know, to drink, as we all know, it's very important. We need it. Water is life, but also thinking about the societies that rely upon water and clean water. And when I say societies, I also mean animals, our four-legged friends, our winged friends. All of the creatures we consider our relatives, and these are their societies too. They live here too. So to talking about where my story began, or when I started We Are Water Protectors, and how it affects social studies. If you're not familiar with Standing Rock, that's one of the main, I guess, inspirations from the story that I wrote. Not just Standing Rock really, but all Indigenous peoples' fights for clean water. There are, you know, many Indigenous peoples all over the world that are fighting for clean water, for you know, for many things, for you know, for the creatures, for us. So just to talk about Standing Rock, to give you some idea of what that was about. Here we're going to just look at the United States. If you see here, in North Dakota is up here at the very top middle part, really near the Canadian border. This Turtle Mountain here, this little teeny triangle, or yeah, little square even, is the Turtle Mountain. That's my reservation. That's where my people come from, this area here, really. And then Standing Rock is down here in North Dakota, so it's very far south here. The oil fields, and the book talks a lot about the black snake, and the black snake is really the oil pipelines. And the oil pipeline, or the oil, the Bakken oil fields are called, start here in North Dakota. And so there was a pipeline that was built, or was being built, that was going to take oil from there down to Illinois and then be trucked out to different places. But the water, as you can see here more on the pipeline, a closer view, the Standing Rock Reservation is here. The pipeline was going to go right through the reservation. So right across this land here, you can see where the Missouri River, the Cannonball River meet. So that caused a lot of devastation to the planet, to animals, to us, if we don't have clean water. And this again is all downstream, because water, again, does flows downstream. So you have everything that is affected by that downstream from that. So here I have a map that just shows you some pipeline incidents from 1986 to this is 2014. So you can see the black little dots here, or big dots really, are mostly oil spills that have happened. But then we have natural gas spills, leaks, because most of these pipelines do leak. It just is a matter of how much. So that just gives you a bit of idea about that. But this is Standing Rock. Well, this is the area where the camp was first began. That was protecting the water, and so people came together. More than 574 federally recognized tribes and Indigenous people from all over were here for there, I should say, in North Dakota at Standing Rock to stand up for clean water and the environment. Here is my tribal flag, as I went too fast, but you can see it down in the corner. So my people were there. Many, like I said, over 574 tribal, federally recognized tribal nations. These are some just examples of what happened at Standing Rock. There was militarized police force. It was a very peaceful protest. I don't like to use the word protest because it wasn't. It's a protecting. They're standing to protect not only the water but burial grounds as well. But there are sacred burial grounds there for the Lakota people, and that's very important that land be kept pure and sacred. So again, just showing some pictures. Here is this in Washington, D.C., where I live. You can kind of see, was able to bring my son to some protests that happened in Washington, D.C. This was in September of 2016. Standing Rock, really, the camp started in April of 2016. So this was about 6 months later. Is still going on. People were coming from all over, as I said, all over the world to stand for the water and for the land. So just some tribal flags here. Again, it got cold in winter, but people were still standing here in winter of 2016. Then again in March of 2016, 2017, there was a teepee camp that happened here in DC, and people from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe were here, and I was able to go to some of the protests and some of the marches that were here and meet some of the people that I've followed and know and have met because of this the Standing Rock situation. I just want to give you a little update on what's happening now currently. That the Dakota Access Pipeline has been in service for about 3 years without an environmental impact statement, basically just something to say that would need to prove and show the impact on the environment. This was never done. But just recently, as of March 2020, a federal judge tossed out the permits for the Dakota Access Pipeline in order to full environmental impact review. So this is really a very good step and a good sign for the Lakota people and all of us really to hope that something does positively come from this, and maybe they will be able to stop the pipeline. Some things I wanted to pass along to you that I think were important that you might want to take back and take away from this, and these are some things that you'll be able to get afterwards, some information and resources that are available. But some things for you to think about is to talk about and think about where your water does come from and how does it get to you and what does that look like, you know, and just that whole process. Those are some things that are really good to talk about with your class and your students. Also, something else I think that's important is to look up, learn about the indigenous people that live near you today and whose land that you live on. Because we all live on indigenous lands, tribal lands, and there actually is an app, it's called Land App. And if you just go on it and put your zip code in, you can see exactly what tribal lands that you are on. So you'll have some idea more, than maybe you can do some research on the people in that land. So you have some idea of the communities that were there prior to you and are still there. And again, as I said, four-legged to the plants, the trees, all these are related to us, and especially as an Ojibwe person, and that's how I see them, as relatives. And so it's important that, you know, clean water and clean land affects them too. And it's our job as stewards of the planet to protect them and look out for them. So that's another part of the society, or a society that we can speak for, but that can't speak for themselves. But we need to think about when we make decisions that we do. Here are also some local activities that maybe you could identify some local activities in your area that impact you directly, and maybe how looking and seeing how diverse voices are being reflected in that. Invite community members into your group or your school, or maybe even Zooms if you could, to talk to your class and your students. Also identify young people that are currently taking action to make some change. And I'm going to show you a slide next to show you some young people and see maybe how you can help take action, empower other kids, and to learn more about environmental issues. And then this slide again too is something else that will be available for you as well, but it has some resources like Earth Day Network, Earth Guardians, Indigenous Climate Action, Honor Earth, Climate Justice Alliance, and then Native American children's teens books and resources here. So just some things here that I recommend that are very helpful, I think, that you could use in your classroom or share with your friends even, or just look up here. There's so many ways to get involved and learn more about ways to take action and, you know, help out in the other societies too. Like I said, our four-legged friends, and as well as ours. This is very important. And then water protectors. These are some young people today that you might even want to learn more about, and perhaps even do some reading and research on. Nayland Pike, Autumn Peltier, Quana Chasing Horse, Dakota Iron Eyes, and Shatexcott Martinez. Again, all these people are doing some very important work and some very you know, especially Autumn, she is like chief water commissioner of the Anishinaabe Nation in Canada. So the things that they're doing to bring awareness, and she's started at the age of 8. So again, Nayland is 17. So these are very young people, you know, just like you, but not much older than you if they're not your age. But it's just some good opportunities to reach out and see younger people that are making a difference, and to see other ways that you could also make a difference. So that's, I just want to say thank you. I think I might be done a little bit early because I got a minute to spare. So I don't know, Katie, you could use that minute if you like, but I probably gave you a little bit extra time.
Thank you, Carole. That was amazing.
Thanks.
Carol shared a lot of really great resources with us. Some of them have been added to the chat that you guys can access right now. There are links in that Zoom webinar chat that are available to you now, but we'll also include some of these resources that Carole has shared along with the recordings when we send those out as well, to make sure everyone has access to them. Thank you, Carole. That was really amazing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah.
It's good to be with you all too. I miss you guys.
Well, it's not over yet. After Tracy goes, we'll have some more time together during
That's awesome. Definitely. I'll be here.
Good. Now I will turn things over to our second guest teacher of the day, who is Tracy Nelson Maurer. Tracy is the author of over 100 books, including John Deere, That's Who, and many other nonfiction books for children. She lives near Minneapolis with her family and loves to interact with readers on her frequent school and library visits. Tracy, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, MacKids. This is great. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. I'm excited to talk with you about one of my nonfiction books, a true story. It's about the invention of the telegraph and the Morse code. It's a biography, so it's a story about a person, Samuel Morse. So people have asked me about my biographies. They've asked, how do I choose who to write about? Because there's so many interesting people. One of the things that I look for are people who have made a difference in America or the world. So they're people who make change in where we live and in our history. But more than that, I also look for some fun facts, something surprising that you wouldn't necessarily know about those people. And it's also important to me that I can make a connection for you, the reader, about that time period. Because I think connecting to history can give us some insights and show us some things to understand our world today a little bit better. So let's go back to the early 1800s when Samuel Morse was a boy. Think about this. No news traveled quickly. From town to town, it would have to go by horseback, in a letter perhaps, or overseas, it would go on a ship. So nothing traveled very quickly. There were no instant messages like we have today. Here's another thing. There was no electricity. No electricity. They knew about it. It had been discovered, but nobody knew how to make it useful. So I'm going to switch to sharing my screen. And while I do that, I want you to look around your room and think about the things that use electricity. All right. See what you can see. Whoops, I got a lot going on here. There we go. And there we go. All right, did you see some things? Well, here is a picture of me when I was about 3 years old. I'm sitting at my grandmother's desk. So this was a long time ago. And you can see some things that use electricity there. It's kind of hard to see. There's a light over the dining room table. There's a TV in the corner. There's a telephone on the wall. There's a lamp on the desk. And right below the telephone, there's a switch plate for the electric lights. No, I bet you use other devices that use electricity today too, don't you? So, well, we're on a computer, right? Well, Samuel Morse didn't have any of those things. So here's a picture of him. None of those things existed in his day. And in fact, sadly, he was in another town working on a painting that was commissioned, and his wife fell deathly ill. And by the time a letter informing him arrived, she was already buried. So you'd think that maybe that was the reason that he decided to start looking at ways to solve this problem of not having instant communication, but there's no evidence of that. In fact, what caught my eye about Morse was when I was working on this book about Noah Webster, because the most famous picture, a portrait, a painting of Noah Webster was signed by Samuel F.B. Morse. And I thought, well, is that the same Morse that invented the Morse code, that invented the telegraph? How can an artist also be an inventor? And that's how most of my books start, with a question. So I started doing research. Where would you go for research? I went to the library. That's how most of my books start, with a trip to the library, and I check out as many books as I possibly can. And then I look for primary resources. So that can be diaries, newspaper articles, or letters. Samuel Morse filled up 2 whole books just full of letters. That was great. You could do the same kind of research too. I like to go to libraries online, like the Library of Congress and the New York Public Library. Your parents could probably help you to do that too, and you could go to your local library online. Where else could you go for research? Well, when I can travel, I love going to museums and art galleries. So this picture here on the left with the winter scene is Samuel Morse's home in Poughkeepsie, New York. And there's the curator who answered a lot of my questions. The big picture is me standing next to a painting of General Lafayette, and that's who Morse was painting when his wife passed away. So that's at the Crystal Bridges Museum in Little Rock, Arkansas, or not Little Rock, in Arkansas. And then the central photograph is a picture of Samuel Morse's statue in the New York Central Park area. And then there's a picture of his daughter. So I looked at a lot of different paintings, a lot of different sources. Well, it turns out that Morse was a pretty good portrait painter, and he was well known for that, but that's not what he really wanted to do. What he really wanted to do was be known as America's finest painter, a fine artist, and he wanted to paint grand pictures. He wanted to paint scenes. He wanted to paint Hercules dying and battle scenes and Bible stories, that kind of thing. But Americans weren't that interested in fine art. So he thought, well, I'll go to France and Italy, and I'll study the old world masters there. And to bring the ideas back to the Americans, I'll paint this picture of all of the old world masters. So this was a style of painting called the gallery painting. It's an imagined setup where he imagined not all of, but several of the most significant paintings of the old world masters on one location. And so this is the Louvre in France. And you have to be a pretty good artist to copy the old world masters. Can you find the Mona Lisa? She's right down there in the bottom row, right? So he painted all of these famous paintings, and this painting is about 9 feet across and 6 feet tall. It's huge, right? And it took him about 2 years to paint. When he was done, he rolled it up and he sailed back to America. And that's when his creative thinking started to switch over to more of an inventing kind of a thinking. Well, he was on the ship and they were talking about not so new news. And then they started to talk about electricity. And they wondered who could make that electricity useful. Samuel Morse, that's who. So he knew that electricity flows through wires. So he thought that this lever to tap on the flow of electricity would interrupt it, and then a machine on the other end connected by wire could interpret it, could understand what the code was. Well, that required a code. So he also invented a code. And this is pretty complicated, isn't it? He had taps for the numbers, and then the numbers stood for different words, which would require a very large code book. So he simplified, thank goodness. Today it looks like this. This is the International Morse Code. One of the things that's still there from Morse's time are the simplified codes for the letters that we use the most often. He took the time to figure out which letters do we use, because if we're simpler on those, we can do the coding faster. Can you find a dit or a dot and one that has just a dash or a da? That's what they're called by coders today. One dit, one da, the E and the T. Yeah. This sounds like it was pretty easy. It took years for him to work out. There were a lot of mistakes. There were a lot of problems along the way. He also decided that the best thing to do was to get a team, right? Sometimes a team is the best answer. Well, together they were able to make his idea work in 1844, 176 years ago. Yeah. Well, you can imagine that switching to no communication from town to town to having instant communication was well received in the United States. And here is Nevada. They're putting up poles. You can see that there's a horse-drawn carriage, a wagon. We didn't have tractors yet. I talked about that in one of my other books, John Deere, that too, but no tractors yet in 1914. By this time, we had telegraph poles all across the United States, and there was cables that went underneath the ocean. I think, you know, if you took a drive right now out to the countryside, you would see telephone poles like that. That's what we use them for now, is telephone poles, but those were what Samuel Morse devised for the telegraph system. It's here today. Right. Well, the code and the system really changed the United States and changed the world. In the upper corner, you can see there are women who are telegraph operators, and this was one of the very first jobs that was available for women, and it changed a lot of lives to be able to earn a living. You can see in the other picture, there are people in the territories that were able to report back. The other photo of a soldier, it looked like he's typing on a typewriter, but it was actually a machine that was invented to translate letters into Morse code during World War II. Well, the code had an impact all over. Can you think of all of the different ways to suddenly be able to communicate could change how we live? There were railroad schedules that could be communicated, news reports, shipping schedules, military information, explorers, legislation, family news, and new inventions that were spurred by this. The telegraph led to the telephone, and eventually to computers, which eventually led to instant messaging, as we know it today. So the code is still used. Do you know this code? ... dash, 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 ... Can you figure it out? It's SOS. It's the international call sign for help. So let's learn it. So let's do snaps for the dits and claps for the daws. Okay, let's do it together. Snap, snap, snap. Clap, clap, clap. Snap, snap, snap. SOS. You just did Morse code. This website too is really fun to play with so that you can actually hear what Morse code sounds like. Along the way, people learned that they could actually listen to Morse code and hear it like a song and interpret it that way. If you go to my website, you can learn more about Samuel Morse, that too, the book, the story of the telegraph and the Morse code. There's also a Morse code on my website that you can use so that maybe you could use it to make things. For example, I think you can see this is a bracelet. So I used noodles for the dashes and beads for the dots. You could do that, or maybe you could use the Morse code to send some letters to your friends, do some things in Morse code. Well, thank you very much for sharing this time with me. I hope that you have a chance to look at some of the people who have made such a big impact on our world.
Thank you, Tracy. That was fantastic. I was snapping and clapping along with you. I didn't turn my video back on. I forgot, but I was right there with you.
That's good. All right. Thank you.
Welcome back, Carol. We are going to move into the Q&A portion now with both authors, both guest teachers. So if you do have questions that you want to ask our guest teachers, you can use that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to type in your question and send it over, and I'll read it aloud for everyone to hear. If you need a parent or guardian to help you, you'll have plenty of time to help get that question typed out. And remember, if you are a young reader sending in a question, we would love it if you could include your first name and your age so that we can help prioritize some of your questions to the top of our list. While everyone is kind of getting their thoughts together and adding in their questions into that Q&A box, we're going to start with a question that was sent in to the event in advance. from a young reader, and that is, what do you do when you have a great idea, but you're stuck on what actually to write? So anyone who wants to can go first, if you have any pearls of wisdom to share with our audience and our young readers.
Well, for me, when I'm stuck, usually I just like put it away, maybe for that day, and I'll go for a walk, like outside and through the trees, just be out in nature. And then oftentimes I find that story or whatever it is stuck. Starts creeping into my head. And so then it somehow or other, it gets solved, or I might just think, oh my gosh, I know what it is. So for me, it's easier to, when I'm not just sitting there trying to force it, it seems to come easier when I just let it, just get away from it for a little bit.
I think that works for me too. I agree. The other thing I try to do, if I have some information already started, is to try a different structure, a different form. So maybe try poetry with it, or use a question and answer format, or pretend to talk to the person that I'm writing about and listen to what they have to say.
That's good. That's good too.
I think those are both very good answers. Our next question is from Anaya. She's 10 years old, or they're 10 years old, and would like to know, did you do any interviews while you were working on your books? If so, how did you feel when doing them?
I interviewed curators and people who work at the different museums. So I didn't get to, interview Samuel Morse, but I interviewed people who were very active as radio operators and use Morse code today, and military people who have used it. And what I wanted to know is, how did it connect to their world today? I think that's really important to understand.
Oh, for my book, because it's not really a nonfiction per se book, I didn't interview any one person, but I did become quite good friends with many people from Standing Rock. And I was so involved when everything started there that I just followed and just learned as much as I could from people. And when since I live in DC, there were a few protests or a few events here, and people that I had met that are from Standing Rock came to DC. And so I made sure I met them and introduced myself. And so that was awesome. So yeah, I guess, I think it's awesome to be able to, that's one of my favorite parts of writing, is the research part of it, just to read and read. And sometimes I don't know when to stop, when should I start writing? And I mean, you can read forever, just like you have to pull a plug sometimes and just say, I gotta write now. So anyway.
All right, we have a question also from Lily, age 8. They would like to know, what is your favorite book?
Favorite book that I've read, or favorite book that I've written?
I think you can feel free to give us both. Your favorite book to work on, but then maybe also your favorite book that you've read as a recommendation to our readers.
Oh, gosh, there are so many good ones. I don't even know other books to recommend.
Yeah.
Read as many books as interest you. I think that's the recommendation. As far as my own books, that's like asking a mom, who's your favorite child? There isn't a favorite, but there's something I love about every book that I've written. And for example, with Samuel Morse, it was understanding how one invention could still be valid today and have changed America so much, and still have echoes of that all the way through to today.
Oh God, again, for me, it's hard to say my favorite book. I have so many favorite books. I love books. Anything to do with, sometimes I might be into sci-fi, sometimes just nonfiction. It's hard for me to say what I think, but for me, I would tell you what my favorite book was when I was a kid, and I can't find it anywhere because it's a ratty-tatty looking cover, but it was Charlotte's Web. When I was little, that was my favorite book. I read it to my brother all the time. He was older than me, and he never yelled at me for doing it. I don't know why, but he would just let me. I just read and over and over. I just love that story. And now my favorite book that I wrote was probably We Are Water Protectors.
It's a good
question. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, we have another question from Marlena, age 10. It's a two-part question. So they would like to know, how do you narrow down your resources for your books, and how do you work with your illustrator? Kind of two parts about process.
Well, that's tough. Yes, narrowing down the resources, because sometimes there's so many books, it's hard to say when. And just like what Carole was saying, you could go on and on and on. I try to get as many books as I can to start with, that trip to the library. One of the things that I do to say, okay, it's time to stop the research and start the writing, is to see if I can talk it out. Can I verbalize it? Can I explain to you what I'm going to write about? Because then I have to know enough in order to do that. I can always go back and find more details and more information all the way up until it's done, but until it's published. But that's sort of the benchmark. And then the question about the illustrators, and Katie can probably even add to this, but we don't get to work with the illustrators very much. They kind of keep us apart. And I think that's maybe because they think that we might be a little bossy. I don't know.
Yes. I agree with Tracy, definitely, about what you said about the first part there. And the illustrator thing, I want to add something. Exactly what you said about that. For my book, it was different, I think, because my book has a lot of cultural elements that are specific to my tribe, which is Ojibwe. And the illustrator is also Indigenous. She's Tlingit. But there are other 574 tribes, and we all have different, cultural elements, ceremonies, ways of being. And so she and I did talk before, originally we spoke, even we didn't tell anybody. We talked together. We're like, well, we have to talk about this. Makisha, the editor knows now. But at first, we're like, well, she has to know. I wasn't going to tell her anything to do with my words, because that is, that's the magic of the illustrator. This is where they get to do their job. We did our job. We wrote the book. We wrote the text. Now the illustrator gets to take those words, and this is the fun part for me, and then interpret them into what they see. Oh man, and nothing is funner when you get to look at the sketches, like, oh my gosh, that person sees this from the words that I made, my word. So it's only a time for us when I speak to the illustrator, if it's a cultural or to try to be specific. Like I sent her pictures of clothing and the flowers and things like that, but otherwise we don't really talk about, we don't influence their amazing work. Good questions.
Yes, thank you to everyone who sent in our questions. We had some really good ones. We're unfortunately running short on time, so that will have to be the last one. So just want to say thank you again to Tracy and to Carole for teaching us so much today in our streaming Schoolhouse. Again, there are some resources available to you guys in the chat. We're adding some more information. You can find some more details out on the website that was sent out in your registration confirmation as well. And we will send some additional resources around when we send the recording as well, for anyone who wants more information about where to find Carole and Tracy's books for purchase at your local bookstore or through borrowing from your local library. So thank you again so much. We learned a lot of things today. I learned a lot of things, and I'm sure that our attendees did as well. And we will be back tomorrow, everyone, for another streaming Schoolhouse session, this time with Writing with Dashka Slater and Mahogany Brown. So we will see everyone tomorrow, and we say thank you again to Tracy and to Carole.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Be well.
Bye.